How to make radial symmetry plates. To begin, there are some basic shapes that you'll want to know how to do because you can combine them in many different ways for your design. The first one is a simple sphere, and you'll just tear a little piece of clay and roll it between your hands back and forth until it sort of smooths out and looks kind of like this. It doesn't have to be a perfect sphere. You could also roll it on the table, although I think that your hands are a little easier for the sphere. Now you can really easily change it into what we call a coil, which kind of looks like a little snake, just by rolling your hands back and forth in sort of one direction. You could also do this on the table, which I think works a little better because you get a smoother coil. Now, there's a lot of different things you could do with a coil. You could leave it on your own. You could take a little bit more clay and make a longer coil, like I'm doing here. I'm starting it in my hands, and now I'm going to finish it by rolling it back and forth on the table. And when I roll, I go from my fingertips to my palm, back and forth, checking for thick spots. You want it to be somewhere in between a pencil and your finger in thickness. So with this coil, I can make kind of a zigzag shape. I could make sort of like an S shape. I could make a squiggly line. I could make all kinds of different shapes, and I'm sure you'll figure out some that I haven't even thought of. So what I'm going to do next is make a coil, spiral. So again, I'm starting by roughly shaping the coil, and I'm going to roll it on the table. I'm checking for thick spots, rolling it back and forth. This is harder than it looks, but the good thing about this project is that the coils don't have to be perfect, and so just try to get it as even as you can. So I'm just going to sort of twirl the end inside of itself, and it sort of begins to form like a snail shape or a spiral, and you can kind of seal the end. So here are four basic shapes that you can use: the coil, the sphere, a zigzag, or a spiral, but you're not limited just to those. So once you have your paper template drawn and you're ready to begin, you're going to work from the center out. So what I've done is I have the 4 spheres that are shown in the center, and I'm also going to prepare the 4 S shapes. I wouldn't do anything more than that at the beginning because the clay can dry out and then you won't be able to blend them together. So to start, just work from the center out. So it's really important with the coils and the spheres and everything that the thickness needs to be somewhere between the thickness of a pencil and no bigger than your finger. Now, if it's smaller, skinnier than a pencil, you're going to have cracking issues and your piece probably won't make it. And if you, on the other hand, are working really thick, thicker than, say, your finger, then your piece runs the risk of blowing up and it's going to be kind of clunky and heavy. So I have my 2 S shapes. I have 2 more to go. And what I want you to do is you're going to start laying the shapes right down on the paper. You're going to be working right on top of the paper. And you might have to press a little firmly at the beginning to get the first ones to stick. Not enough so that you're going to totally mush the shape. Because what we're doing here is we're going to smooth it from the back, and the front, the underside, the side that's touching the paper is going to stay, the design is going to stay. So it's really important that you don't use all your muscles. So see how I have these little spaces here? I need to fill them in. Now, so if you have anything like that, you could do something similar to this, but you could also use little spheres. I'm going to use little coils, and I'm just putting a little bit of extra clay there because in the final piece there can't be any cracks. So I'm almost ready to begin smoothing. I have all the spaces filled in my first 2 rows. I'm just gently pressing that in. And now what you're going to do is brace the piece with your left hand or your right hand, depending on which one you prefer, because it will slide around. And you're just going to sort of smear the clay I think it works best from the higher coils to the lower coils, but as a general rule of thumb, you could work from the outside in. But you'll see some of the clay will move very easily and some of it won't feel like there's enough. So you just have to figure it out for your own specific piece. The goal here is that you're going to have a very smooth surface that you cannot see any of the original coil lines. So if you can see where the coil was underneath, that will crack later. So you want to make sure that you really do a good job blending and smoothing everything together. Now you might not notice this if I didn't point it out, but I'm really not pressing too hard on the edges because they are kind of fragile and they'll smush and the shape will change. So as you're working, just keep in mind you don't want to press right on the edge. There's much more forgiveness on the inside. So you're going to go around your first 2 layers and really smear them in. And then you're ready to begin working on each other layer. Okay, so after you get the first 2 layers down, I want you to work on smoothing each layer at a time. So you'll see I'm putting all of the coils down, that's my next row, and I'm going to smooth them in towards the center, making sure to sort of erase all the seams. And then I'm ready to move on to my next row. So it's really important that you do this because let's say you get all your shapes out and you're ready to start smoothing them, but it's been so long that they're too dry to smooth. So at least if you have to stop working for the day, everything that you have made is going to be okay. So you'll see I'm just going all around and now I've finished my piece. You can choose to have a patterned edge like this one, it's kind of jaggedy, or you can have a smooth edge, so you would just fill that in with one coil so it's a nice smooth circle. It's totally up to you, however you want your design. And then lastly, you're just going to go around and make sure you didn't miss a spot, check all the seams, make sure it's good. And the last thing you're going to do is to make feet. And feet are just like a funny term for the part of the plate that lifts it up off the table a little bit. And we're going to be using 3 spheres. You could shape them a little differently if you want. And what you're going to do is you're going to be scoring them. And scoring is just another word for scratching. So use a fork. You're going to score both pieces of clay that are going to be touching. So you're going to score the foot and you're going to score the spot on the bottom of the plate. And then you just put a little water on your fingers. It might take you a couple times. And you're going to gently wet the scored area on the foot and then press it down very firmly, but not enough that you're going to smush it, onto the plate. If you wanted to, you could smooth the sides down if you'd prefer it to look more blended, but I'm going to leave mine. And it's really important that you do this step. It might feel like the clay will stick even if you don't score it, but it will pop off in the kiln later because the clay is moist, so it sticks to itself. But once it dries, it comes right off. So the scoring and putting water on is kind of like creating a little Velcro and a little glue, and it makes sure that it's not going to go anywhere. So again, you just scratch it, scratch both sides, put a little bit of water on, press it down firmly. And sometimes if your fingers are wet, you might want to dry them off before you go ahead and press it down. Otherwise, it might get a little slippery and hard to work with. So just keep a paper towel nearby. So on to my last one. Now the height of them isn't quite so important because we're going to be able to level them out later. So just worry about the placement of them, if they're even in diameter, meaning all like the width of them, and make sure that they're really sealed down good. Okay, so what you're going to do to level the feet is you're going to take a board, and this is probably going to be the board you're going to store your piece on. You're going to make sure it's level, not angled, and then just gently press down till you feel a little give, and you'll see that all three of your feet has smushed a little bit. And you don't want to do this more than once. Just do it once, just a little bit flat, and now it'll ensure that they're really not going to wobble. So I actually haven't shown you this yet, and that's because you shouldn't look either. You want to keep it sort of a surprise till the end, and you can see all your hard work. So when it dries, you need to keep it upside down. So with the feet up, and you want to put something on the board. Could be a newspaper, could be a paper towel, and you really don't want to bend it. So when I just kind of dropped it down there, I was careful not to bend. At the end of day one, you're going to want to make sure that you write your name on the bottom, even if you're not finished. You can just use a little wooden tool. Please don't use a pencil. And make sure that you write your name and what period your class is in. And that way, day two, even if you're not finished, you'll be able to get it back. And so there it is. There's the finished product. Tips for success. Keep your coils even in thickness. Smooth them as you go. And avoid pressing the edges. And have fun!